The river was never silent. Its surface shimmered beneath the pale sun, but beneath that calm skin lurked shadows long and coiling. A band of Australopithecus moved cautiously along its edge, their lean forms draped in mud and dust from the hunt. They carried nothing but crude stone flakes bound to branches and bundles of gathered roots. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth, and every ripple in the current drew their wide, anxious eyes. They had learned from the torn remains of antelope and the vanished bodies of their own that the water itself was a predator. The monstrous eels that haunted the river's depths struck without warning, snapping bones with jaws unseen, dragging flesh into darkness. Hunger forced them here, but fear knotted every step. A young female crouched at the bank, scooping water into cupped leaves, her movements careful, her nostrils flaring as she sniffed for rot. The others kept watch, scanning the reeds. A sudden splash made the group freeze. The water bulged as if something vast pressed against it from below. Birds erupted from the trees, shrieking. The band retreated up the bank, gripping their crude tools, eyes wide with silent screams. From the churning surface, a dark length broke free. Thick muscular writhing, a monstrous eel longer than a man, its body thrashing with a violence that sent waves pounding against the shore. The tribe held their ground, every chest heaving with the ancient terror of prey. Hunger still gnawed at their bellies. They could not leave the river. Herds had moved far onto the plain, and the dry season was stealing fruit from the trees. The only promise of meat lay beneath the water's skin. So the tribe gathered branches and sharpened stone tips, binding them with sinew. Their leader, an older male with a deep scar raked across his back, plunged the spear into the sand, testing its strength. The others followed, echoing his determination in silence. The hunt began at dusk, when the shadows on the river lengthened. They waded knee-deep into the current, forming a line, the older guarding the younger. The water lapped against their thighs, murky and trembling. Then movement. A ripple darting upstream too fast, too deliberate. The scarred leader raised his hand, and all froze. Beneath their feet, the earth seemed to shift. Then, with the violence of a storm, the river exploded. The eel launched upward, body twisting like a black whip, striking a young male across the chest. He collapsed into the water, with a muffled cry dragged down in an instant. The others lunged forward, spears plunging, a frenzy of splashes, thrashing bodies, blood seeping into the current. The battle raged with no sound, but guttural gasps and the roar of water. The tribe pulled the young male free, torn and bleeding, his ribs marked by the eel's crushing bite. Women rushed to pack herbs against the wound, chewing leaves into paste and pressing it into the open flesh. Children wailed, but were hushed, drawn into the safety of the circle. The eel sank back into the depths, leaving only a swirl of blood in its wake. Victory was unfinished hunger, unsatisfied, but survival barely had been earned. Above them, storm clouds gathered, rolling in with the weight of an omen. Thunder cracked across the savanna, and lightning speared the horizon. The river hissed with the first drops of rain, washing blood away. The hunt was not yet over, and the night promised trials darker than the depths themselves. The storm fell heavy, turning the savanna into a blur of silver rain and shaking leaves. The band of Australopithecus huddled beneath a rocky outcrop, their bodies pressed close for warmth, their fireless night lit only by the furious sky. The injured young male shivered violently, every spasm pulling pain across his torn chest. The women worked in silence, spreading crushed herbs along his ribs, binding them with long strips of bark fiber. Each clap of thunder jolted the children awake, their eyes wide and fearful, but the group remained quiet. watching the swollen river churn and rise under the storm's command. The monstrous eels stirred unseen beneath that flood, emboldened by the chaos of water, waiting for the careless. At dawn, the storm eased, but the river had transformed into a world-brown torrent. The band moved along its edge, searching for a safe crossing. Migration demanded it their foraging grounds behind them, stripped bare the horizon ahead, their only hope. The leader, scarred and unyielding, tested the ground with his spear. The water surged high, carrying logs and debris, but beyond it lay fertile plains where fruiting trees had been glimpsed in earlier seasons. The choice was cruel: face the river and its monsters, or starve on the barren side. Hunger again made the decision for them. They began to gather materials, weaving thick mats of reeds and tying them with twisted vines, crafting makeshift rafts. Their movements were frantic. The children kept high on their mothers' hips, while the older members dragged heavy logs to the edge. The leader organized them with sharp gestures, placing the strongest at the front, the injured carried in the center. The roar of the river drowned out everything, but their determination was louder still. They pushed off. The rafts buckled under their weight, the current immediately seizing them, spinning them sideways. The tribe dug their crude paddles into the flood, fighting to stay together. The water sprayed against their faces, blinding them, but they pressed forward. Then the river beneath them stirred. A massive shadow cut through the current, brushing against the underside of the rafts. The children clutched at their mother's hair, eyes wild with silent terror. A moment of stillness, then the eel struck again. It surged upward, its body breaking the surface, jaws snapping shut around one of the reed bundles. The raft split, bodies tumbling into the water. Chaos erupted. Screams of breathless panic, the slap of limbs thrashing in the torrent. The eel coiled around a young female, pulling her down. The leader dove, spear in hand, plunging it deep into the twisting form. Blood clouded the river, mixing with the mud of the flood. Another male joined, striking again and again, until the eel writhed in agony and released its prey. The female surfaced, gasping, clinging to a log. Her eyes wide with the raw terror of death, cheated. The battle raged not only against the eel, but the river itself. The current tore families apart, sweeping them downstream. The rafts splintered, tools and bundles lost. Still, stroke by stroke, the survivors clawed their way to the far shore. Muddy, bloodied, trembling, they dragged one another onto the bank. Behind them, the river raged, swallowing the remains of their struggle, the monstrous form sinking slowly into the murk. They collapsed in a heap, soaked and shivering. The injured lay in the center, tended to with gentle hands. Children curled against their mothers, too exhausted to cry. Above them the storm had passed, and the sun broke through, golden and warm, casting light over the survivors. The land beyond stretched green and alive, a promise waiting to be seized. But their ordeal was not finished. On the horizon, another danger stirred, a rival band, silhouettes, moving through the trees, drawn by the sound of battle and the scent of blood. The rival band emerged from the tree line, lean and fierce, their bodies scarred by hunger and war. They carried stones sharpened to brutal points, their faces painted with ash. For a moment, silence held between the two groups, the survivors of the river broken but alive, and the strangers who saw weakness before them. Tension crackled like the storm still echoing in the clouds. The scarred leader rose, gripping his bloodied spear, planting himself firmly before his people. The rival band advanced, growling low, testing his resolve. Children clung to their mothers, wide-eyed. The injured groaned softly on the ground. Then the survivors, though battered, rose together. Spears lifted, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, a wall of defiance. Their unity spoke louder than fear. The rival band hesitated, reading the fire in their eyes, and after a long breath retreated into the shadows, leaving the survivors to claim the land. Exhausted, the tribe sank to the ground. They shared what roots remained pressed together for warmth and looked to the sky, where the storm had cleared. The river had tried to break them, the eel had tried to claim them, but they had endured. In their unity, survival had become legend.